No, it's mine. Don't worry. Sorry, I will shut it up.
About employability from the start and collaborative in the Department of Social Work. So, talk a little of acknowledgement. So, my colleague Sarah Redmond couldn't be today, but she was an apprenticeship course that we, as were members of the service user care group. So, it was really they have had developing the approach that created departments, curriculum design. As I say, okay, so this is the abstract that we put. That. Just put it there so that it's just much as a reminder for me. So the presentation is going to look at and explain some of the way that we've approached collaborative curriculum with stakeholders and about the value of the different stakeholders, different highlight with an overall, I suppose, objective. I teach social work. Social workers, so that was kind of the under. And I think that's transferable. Teaching side. Whatever, football coaching, whatever it is that you do, you want it all, don't you? So, and the most prepared. So as I've mentioned already, this is an approach that we've used twice so far successfully in the department. Apprenticeship course, math. We are a regular specialist register. Oversight date social work courses to kind of rubber stamp that they are fit for purpose. So this is an approach that we've used, with good results. So we think about the foundations of curriculum, or the way that we view it is that stakeholder at the bottom hierarchy of need. It's a little bit like a hierarchy of need, and that consultation gives us that really, and that those stakeholders should be involved in every aspect of a curriculum design, or have those stakeholders. If I think about, give you an example, from our course, from MA course, one of the things through the collaborative curriculum and their final presentation, their dissertation, then their finding panel by person with social work, and academic, and an employer partner. So they're there all that course, that curriculum. So our approach to curriculum design, as I say, is partnership with us. And it is relational. It's built on a foundation of relationships. Actively in that. And fundamentally, Social Work England asks with us, and that we do because it's values as much as it being a requirement of our regulator, is that our curriculum design process includes the voices of social work curriculum design. They're the people that are out there accessing services provided. So their participation is really there, really strongly connected in the same way that, you know, so our approach is also inclusive and intersectional, and think about and represent marginalised or minority groups in our process for curriculum design. Try to make sure, and it's a bit of a battle, a bit difficult. Service user group to represent the diversity in society, which is a challenge, and one we're working on. But our service users, our student groups, have their voices. And we're also very strong. Build on the strengths that different partners, different stakeholders able process. So I've mentioned this a little bit, probably should have started with this. But our kind of key stakeholders, social work, as they are in a lot of courses, social work, our employer partners. So those partners that provide our student placements while they're on their journey to be, and also the people, social work employers. And again, they've been also our students and graduates. They're the people that, so it's got to be fit for them as well, their voices. So about what we do. So in terms of stakeholder consultation, what we did for our plan for May is we involved within facilitating that consult groups. So we had a work stream, if you like, a consultation work stream for people with lived experience led by academic team. I led that kind of work stream around consultation. So when we developed the apprenticeship, we undertook a piece of research alongside that around curriculum design, coming to consensus, a small research with adaptive Delphi model. So again, about consultation, consensus of what should or shouldn't be in the curriculum based on what the needs, what our employers were telling us the needs were, all the gaps were in knowledge for the graduates that they were, what did they need to, what don't they need? These were for all of the partners, actually, for all of the stakeholders, predominantly. Where are the gaps? What are our graduates missing when they come to you as social workers? What do they need to get into the course? So we had a series of meetings and online survey, kind of things about should this be included, should it not be? What do you think? And that went really, really well. But the courses that we have now very much in what is contemporary, what is our telling us graduates to be effective. And obviously we had somebody who's a little bit tricky, consulting with undergraduate students to design an MA course, or full-time students to design an apprenticeship course. But that's what we did and made it work. Partly because training to be a social worker has to meet the same standards irrespective of whether you're doing master's level. In terms of social working regulatory requirements, their standards, it has to meet the same standards. Students have to have the same knowledge, whether you're an apprenticeship or an postgraduate level. The difference is in the assessment type, obviously, standard in terms of the academic standards that you test against. So it is a bit challenging. It was a bit challenging, but the way that we approached it was very much grounded in those values, being collaborative. A lot of time with our students talking through what we are proposing curriculum for the apprenticeship or for the MA, explain the rationale for that, and what do they think? How do you think, based on their knowledge of being on placement, their second year or their final year, what did they need to know before they went out? What were their out on place? Where were the gaps in them? When they qualified, graduates, we asked, where were the gaps in what did you wish you'd learned? What would you like more of? Those kind of things. And obviously we've got to do that within quite a framework of this is what social working social workers need to know. Of course, to meet the standards of education and training. But on the whole, that works really well with the students, and very good. And certainly when our regulator came in to validate the MA in social work, feedback they had was that they felt we very much lived our values. So all of those things I've inclusive and collaborative, they'd heard evidence of that from these stakeholders, from our student group, that their voices were in line. And it was really, really, it's really important. Oh, proud. I don't think there's a bigger compliment for social workers than someone saying you live your values. I think that's almost chair, but not because we were surprised by that, but just because of that.
It is cooperation.
Yes.
More than it's collaboration, as what you explained to me.
Yeah, co-creation is
Co-creation.
Yeah, absolutely, it's co-creation. Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I thought I'd give you an example of one of the things I did. I'm going to just go through this because I'm conscious of time. But one of the things we did, and this came from our service user group, actually, the idea, we developed it, but the idea behind this was about scaffolding the learning, particularly around community. Obviously, social workers, social work students have to use their communication skills in a range of settings, in a range of different ways, with increasing complexity and increasing challenge. So when we met with the service user, talking about the apprenticeship, they said, well, it might have been the MA, I can't remember which one now, but they said what you need is to build up the complexity and the challenge in the communication skills that students need to use throughout their placement. So in their first year, or before they go out onto placement, it should be about getting the foundations right, building a rapport, how do you introduce yourself, present professionally, and have a professional conversation. Or so we built that into our apprenticeship and to our MA. So those first few weeks, the first 12 months of the course, is very much about getting the foundations right, introducing yourself, sending a professional email. You think these things sound quite simple, but if you're 19 and just straight out from college, knocking on someone's door and introducing yourself, quite daunting. So to get those foundations right, and then what the service user group was saying was then actually before they got onto their first placement, after they've done 12 months on the course maybe, it should be about how do you get through the front door. Someone doesn't really want to let you in for very good reasons, because they're afraid, they're not quite sure why you're there. How do you use your communication skills effectively so that you can enter into their home, they feel comfortable enough to let you in? So we talked about, how do we do that? How do we get through the door? How do we have those difficult conversations that social workers sometimes have when you're sharing information with a family member, or a decision around they can have this support but they can't have that support, or those kind of things. How do we have those quite bold and courageous conversations, difficult conversations, but we're stepping up the complexity in the way our communication skills? Or how do you present in a court? Social work students find that really scary. How do I present? I find that really scary. And then by the end of their final placement, what the service user group was saying, why aren't we testing these communities? Why aren't we asking the students to go really complex? And we do this through role play with members of the service. This is in complex situations where you've got someone who's really, might be under the influence, who might be very angry, might be aggressive. How can we prepare them for that safe environment? So these are the things that we've built in to the course. How do you prepare a student for presenting to a panel of powerful people? It's just something that social workers have to do when you're going to ask for a resource, or you've got evidence that you don't need this piece to do this piece of work, or you go to court, or a really difficult, really powerful people. How do we do that? How do we prepare students? So we use a lot of submersion, or simulation in our teaching to give those students a flavour of what that feels. Bring practice to life in the classroom as much as possible. But the ideas for that came through the approach to curriculum design. Saying we wouldn't necessarily have had those ideas on our own, but they feel much more real and much more valid because they're coming from the lived experience of social work, because they're coming from partners who are out there in practice. So they're coming from our students who've just lived it through their placement. Very conscious of time because I need to be somewhere else. But this just kind of outlines the value for the stakeholders in terms of that collaborative or approach to curriculum design. As I say, the themes are there's three kind of key themes in that value, but they work slightly different for each partner or stakeholder. So the themes are around curriculum that is reflective of consistent practice, and obviously for a person with lived experience, that means that they get really high quality support. In the future, if they need social work intervention again, the students, that means that they're ready for practice, they're prepared, and for the partners, it means that the graduates that they are high quality. They need to invest so much in terms of future learning needs, those kind of things. But it means that they are kind of temporary practice. They've got the knowledge to get them started, and social work sort of context of social work so quickly. Understanding of those kind of things all the time. So you have to constantly update your knowledge. Start your journey with a really good foundation practice, because that curriculum's been built and pre-knowledge at its core. You're in a much better position. The other theme is about inclusion in terms of being the student voice, being respected, experts in my experience with those. And also the final thing about shaping the future work education. And those themes are very similar, but a lot of that making sure that for our students, it's about having the knowledge, skills, and need to get a job, and a good job, and a job that they want, and for it again. They do that through ensuring that through social work is in safe hands. So I've just touched a little bit here on the values of the university. So obviously it's about quality, and so that pink is right on. It's not too bad on there, but there it's really bright.
It's completely different.
So it's about equality and hand. We are high quality, founded on some solid foundation, based on decisions that were made about curriculum. It improves, I think, progression and retention, because better prepared for each next stage of their journey on the books. Obviously, there's a benefit of reputational growth for us as a university, because we're building strong relationships with those partners and our stakeholders in the community. Employer partners go away and talk to each other about actually staff graduates really well prepared for practice, and we've had some of that very informed back fed back to us from practitioners saying, I know if I get a staff student, they're really prepared. Got a good idea, which is a really nice positive feedback to get. I've mentioned about stakeholders get improved graduate outcomes or employability. It links in with these couple of university strategies. I'm going to go into loads of detail with those, but we might think. Anybody got any questions? Go on. So, do you mean how do we formally assess them on the course? Or do you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So we do that through a range of strategies, particularly in the apprenticeship and in the MA. The graduate course, we are undertaking a move it to 20, 40 credits, all those kind of things. But on the MA and the apprenticeship, we've got some quite, I think, innovative approaches, and we try to play to everybody's strengths based on feedback we have from students. So, for example, some of the apprentices will do a professional conversation. So it's almost like simulated supervision as a student social worker. So and they have to apply their knowledge of the law, their theory of social work values to that case scenario, and discuss how they've applied it and what their recommendations would be on the evidence. That makes sense. So one of the things we talk a lot about in social work is evidence and practice. I'm sure lots of professional courses talk about those kind of things. So that's about how do we, that assessment is about how do you make evidence-based decisions, practice. How do you bring knowledge of social work theory, social work values? So we do that. We have some traditional, obviously, written assessments, of course. On the MA, we've built in a simulated kind of panel discussion. So students a case study. It's all quite phenomena based. It's all about bringing practice. So they have a case study again. There's an unfair decision been made, or what we would say is an unfair decision based on our knowledge of the legal framework, social work values, all of those kind of things. And what the students have to do is use research, use our evidence-based evidence-based practice to then go into a simulated panel and challenge that decision and say these are the reasons why I don't think that's the right or fair. Bring in that knowledge, because those are the things that we're